The other major story today is the decision of the United States Supreme Court. It handed down a historic decision about abortion. The court said in a 7-2 decision that in the first 3 months of pregnancy, only the woman and her physician may decide whether she may have an abortion. In the second 3 months, all the state may do is regulate abortion procedures. And only in the final 3 months of pregnancy can the state forbid abortion. The court ruled in cases from Texas and Georgia, but all 50 states are effective, whatever their laws.
Today's decision came as a shock to both anti- and pro-abortionist forces.
Well, it means that January 22nd, 1973 will stand out as one of the great days for freedom and free choice. This allows a woman free choice as whether or not to remain pregnant. This is extraordinary.
From the beginning, pro-abortionist forces have seen this issue as a question of freedom of an individual's choice. The freedom to have an abortion is now legal in every state. The basic legal fight is in effect over. But according to the Roman Catholic Church, the moral fight will never end.
The American people must rededicate themselves to the protection of the sacredness of all human life.
Okay, what are we talking about? I grew up in a pretty small town in Arkansas, and I had never heard of Planned Parenthood. I was looking for birth control. I was a student at Rhodes College here in Memphis. I went to see a gynecologist in Memphis, and I had a horrible experience. I felt really judged about being sexually active. I came back and told my friends, and they looked at me like I was completely insane. They said, "Why didn't you go to Planned Parenthood?" I was blown away by the care that I received. I immediately called the next day and said, "I want to volunteer. I'll do anything that you need me to do." I don't know if it's fate that I belonged at Planned Parenthood or not. I don't really believe in fate, but I'm glad that I'm here at this moment because I feel like we're working in two realities. We're working in the current reality where abortion is legal, and then there's the future reality that is upon us in just a matter of weeks. Memphis was the first Planned Parenthood affiliate in the Deep South to provide abortion services after Roe v. Wade.
When I arrived in 1971, we did educational services only. We did not do medical services. We added contraceptive services between 1971 and 1973. The Roe v. Wade decision happened, and Memphis Planned Parenthood became the first Planned Parenthood affiliate in the southern United States to add abortion services, and really was a trendsetter for the field of family planning, especially for Planned Parenthood affiliates in the southern part of the country.
What is the question the Supreme Court justices will need to examine in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization?
So this is a challenge to the Mississippi law that bans almost all abortions after the 15th week of pregnancy. The lower court struck down the law as unconstitutional, so the state of Mississippi came to the Supreme Court to look at whether or not to overrule Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which are the landmark Supreme Court decisions establishing the basic right to an abortion.
At this point, everything, the whole country, everything rides on the Mississippi case.
Roe v. Wade was really a compromise. You know, it didn't leave everybody elated by any means, but it gave most people something. So for us to be at this point in our history where it could be rolled back is just abominable.
I don't know. It feels like there's nothing we can do now because it's in the Supreme Court's hands. I mean, it's like the bridge has been crossed. It's confounding and frustrating and horrifying, and I feel resigned to it. I have been a reproductive rights activist for a while now. Really got involved in 2011 during the Personhood Initiative here in Mississippi.
The latest battle over abortion rights comes to a head on Tuesday when Mississippi voters will consider an amendment to their state constitution that would say a human being is a person from the moment of conception.
I was sort of like an unofficial spokesperson for No on 26 at the time.
People on the yes side keep saying to me, you know, well, don't punish the baby, punish the rapist, you know. But what they leave out of that equation is me.
Hemmons, now married with 3 children, was raped at gunpoint 20 years ago on her college campus.
If this had been in place and I had gotten pregnant, I wouldn't have had any options. I would have been forced by the state government to bear a child, which might have killed me physically, if not emotionally.
Mississippians could sympathize with somebody with a story like that and see that, you know, someone in that situation should have the right to decide what to do with their own body. The reason Personhood came to Mississippi was because they thought, oh, the most conservative religious state in the country, and then we said no, and everybody was shocked.
Mississippi voters overwhelmingly voted no. Here are the results. No with 57%, yes with 43%.
I was elated that, you know, we held it back. But in my mind, I was like, they're just going to keep developing this in a different way. The anti-autonomy people tend to be pretty organized and tend to have kind of more than one tool working at once and just seeing what works. And unfortunately, that's who's funded.
This is a Fox News election alert. Pennsylvania goes to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the president of the United States.
Hillary Clinton lost the election and the world felt like it was imploding, and I needed an outlet. I started off actually as an escort, and within a little bit of time realized that there was this thing called doulaing. So went through the training and immediately fell in love with the work. When I first came here, I remember sending out feelers to people who were doing work like this and not getting any response. And now I recognize that people have to be very protective of what they're doing because it's not safe, quite frankly. I just actually, not that long ago, got trained on self-managed abortion and being able to not give advice, but give information to people who are seeking alternative solutions.
Just as there was pre-Roe Wade, there will be a new criminal class of health care providers and, you know, people of which I will probably become one against my will, you know, who will be rashly breaking the law and transporting ladies and supporting ladies financially to get their needs met. I think the abortion issue has been made a moral issue in ways that I don't think there's a lot of scriptural or even really a lot of theological tradition for. I myself had an abortion when I was 18. Not only did I have any regrets, to tell you the truth, I don't think I ever really thought about it again. It was very early on. I was extraordinarily lucky. I was able to deal with my situation in a pretty rational, sane way. I had other people that didn't. I had people that raised kids they didn't want at all. And I had friends that, as I said, one person that died in a motel at 19, you know. So, I mean, I don't want to see this stuff happen again.
You know, I ask myself, why do I live here? Especially being as politically engaged as I am.
If I go to the baseball game, I know I'm not sitting around a whole bunch of progressives, you know. Will I be wearing my, I'm pro-choice and I vote mask? Yes, I will.
Kind of a strain of the culture that wants to say, well, if you don't like the way things are here, there's 49 other states that you can move to. I'm kind of a jerk, and so that part of me is able to be like, oh, I should move? Should I?
Living in Mississippi, it feels like, yes, there are a lot of bad things, You know, we're tired of being 50th or 49th in almost every category. But it's like we got nowhere to go but up.
It can get pretty damn hopeless. The GOP supermajority, is no different here than in Tennessee. We could have a contest to see who's worse. I think y'all might be winning right now.
Tennessee, I gotta say, I mean, you asked about Mississippi again. Tennessee seems to me to be populated by more lunacy than Mississippi is.
Thank you for joining us today as we announce further details regarding our state's preparedness efforts for coronavirus, also known as COVID-19. While this is a serious situation, I urge Tennesseans to keep this illness in perspective, as the vast majority of cases are mild and manageable.
When COVID hit, we were immediately hit with an abortion ban that the governor said that, we couldn't provide surgical abortion services because we needed to preserve PPE. So we had to take the state to federal court to get relief from that ban. And then right when we did get the relief, the legislature in the middle of the night passed what the governor called the omnibus abortion bill.
This is a 60-page bill that we're bringing up at midnight.
Poor mothers. We're going to be pushing them into the alleys like it was years and years ago.
There was no notice that this bill would be heard.
Ayes 23, 4 nays.
I declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is hereby tabled.
We weren't expecting that at all. It was, around dinner time, and, I'm pulling on my clothes because I know that they're about to vote on it. So I'm driving in my car and I call Ashley Cofield, the CEO, and I'm like, hey, I think this ban's about to go through. We can't just sit by and let that happen. Would you be open to me being arrested or arrests happening? Because I don't think that we can stand by and let this happen. And she said, absolutely. I said, I'll still have a job, And she said, yes. I was like, okay, all right.
The Senate wanted one budget, the House wanted the other budget, and they actually used the heartbeat bill as barter to get the House to agree to the Senate's budget. And using women's health as a bargaining chip just made me physically sick.
Good morning, Tennessee. Thank you for joining me this morning for what I believe is a historic moment, the signing of arguably the most conservative pro-life piece of legislation in the country.
It included a 6-week abortion ban. It included additional restrictions on how we can provide abortions to our patients. And that's what's going to get us when the Supreme Court decision comes down, is that 6-week ban and that abortion bill, because there is an injunction on that ban, but I think it will be quickly lifted by the Sixth Circuit as soon as the Supreme Court decision comes down. So that'll be the initial way that the state bans abortion, and then that'll be followed by a complete ban with our trigger law.
Breaking news out of Texas overnight. The state's controversial law banning most abortions has now taken effect after the Supreme Court took no action, at least not yet, to hold it off.
If I look back on August and September of 2021, I was still in denial about the Texas situation. I thought, well, it'll only last a few days. And as it happened, first thing I thought was, well, we're going to see that in Tennessee.
We are headed to Cordell Hull building, which is where the legislature meets. It's where they have their committee meetings and all their offices. Today they're taking up House Bill 2779, which is essentially a copycat bill of the Texas bill. Ours is worse because ours is a total ban. It's not at 6 weeks. And so they filed it as a caption bill, which was very broad and general. And then what they did last Monday is they came in with a strike and replace amendment that removes the original bill and completely replaces it with something new.
They no longer put amendments on the website until they've been voted on to add them to the bill in the first committee. So folks at home have no idea. So I screenshotted it and tried to get it out to people on Twitter because they deserve to be able to see this. And I think it is absolutely by design that these things have already gone through their first committee before people can see the language online.
You know, I joke that we're kind of a hope dealer, you know, a lot of times as organizers to kind of give folks a reason to keep fighting. And that really is the only appropriate step that you can do in times like this, is just to keep raising our voice, because not raising our voice isn't really a choice.
We're up for House Bill 2779. Representative Alexander is recognized.
This bill is modeled directly after the legislation passed in Texas last year. The Tennessee language proposes to prohibit all abortion. Courts have blocked other states from imposing similar restrictions, but this law differs significantly because it leaves enforcement up to private citizens through civil lawsuits instead of criminal prosecutors.
This allows people that have no knowledge, no standing, they have not been harmed, to bring a lawsuit against any doctor that they believe have performed an abortion. Explain your intent.
My intent is to bring a bill that protects the unborn life in this state. That is my intent.
We have had a request for testimony. Sir, if you'll just introduce yourself.
My name is Aaron Campbell. I'm a physician from Knoxville. I came today to voice my opposition to this bill and to encourage you all to critically consider the outcomes and potential and anticipated consequences of this bill. It's important to note that abortions will occur whether or not they are legally accessible. What is important for the legislature is to recognize that worldwide, the highest rates of unsafe abortions are completed in areas with the most restrictive abortion laws and lack of access. 1 in 4 women in the United States will have an abortion in their reproductive lives, and it is vital that this part of healthcare remain legal, safe, and accessible.
We will be voting to send this bill to full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I think the ayes have it.
I'm feeling very upset and disappointed, but not surprised, frankly. I'm an ER doctor. I see women in the ER all the time with complications of different issues in pregnancy, and I'm terrified about the possible ramifications of women not being able to have access to safe, legal abortion.
I think an important perspective is becoming lost on the public, on legislators and physicians, in that the real dangerous reality of pre-Roe.
I have never treated a woman who has attempted to terminate her own pregnancy. And that is a real issue that I will have to deal with. So I'm here to fight and support Planned Parenthood, and I'm gonna be here with you fighting the fight.
I'm so sorry. I came from Knoxville this morning. I had the good fortune to be in a meeting with Representative Marsh earlier, just before the Health Subcommittee met. And the activist that I was in the meeting with has a very powerful story. And she was able to share it, and a few of the questions that he posed in today's meeting proved to us that he heard her, and he did connect with parts of it.
Are there any exceptions in your legislation for if you're raped, if the disease or handicap, to health and welfare, to the mother, any of these?
For a moment, I was very hopeful, and then obviously that didn't turn out to be in our favor.
I met with several Republicans, and I talked with them, and I said, you know, what are you going to do post-Roe? Like, in some ways, you know, congratulations, you know, you're like the dog that caught the bus. But, you know, what are you going to do when thousands of people are going to have to either flee the state for health care or be forced to give birth? And they looked shocked. I mean, it was almost like it hadn't occurred to them.
You know, when you have a supermajority, they have the ability to completely silence you. And they don't understand that the very policies they have are what drive up the need for abortions in the state.
in rural Tennessee, the issues that face women who are not women of means are real. You have to be around the other Democrats and get involved and maybe work with your neighbor and do some organizing, everything that's required, because what we've done no longer works. Yeah. That's why we're where we are now.
Exactly.
Our legislature refuses to accept expanded Medicaid. So you have working people, they can't receive adequate pregnancy prevention, and then if they do have a problem pregnancy, they may live in a rural area that no longer has a hospital either. If you're in Jamestown and you have a problem pregnancy, you're going to have to come through a very curvy, hilly road to get to the hospital here, and it's about 45 minutes. It's like, yes, we want you to carry this baby, but we're not going to give you the resources to help you do that.
I will not allow them to say they are pro-life because they don't take care of that child. A child's not going to do well without parents. And if the parents don't have health care, if the parents don't have a living wage, and if that child doesn't have access to a well-funded public education, what are we doing?
We're looking at elections this year. Now that we've been redistricted, it's going to be vital for us to protect our allies right now, so a lot of our effort this year will go to that. I would love to see that we have a supporter group in all 95 counties.
Obviously, rural Tennessee is quite red, although I'll talk to anybody. And when I tell them about expanded Medicaid, one lady said, well, I guess I can vote for one Democrat. When they hear about some of the issues face to face, it has a much different impact. And through that common ground, you can influence each other on issues where you don't agree. We will never change opinions if we don't speak out on what we think is true. And I'll be honest, I've been reluctant to speak out on this issue, but I've worked so hard to have a voice, and now I'm obligated to use that voice, whether I want to or not.
If we're going to tackle changing the culture in Tennessee so it's supportive of reproductive rights, we can't ignore Chattanooga. It's a really important part of the puzzle.
Like, a lot of people here are really, are actually really passionate about reproductive rights. At the rally, we had like 150 people show up to do a direct action to protect abortion access. So even though it's challenging, I actually feel really hopeful, and I'm actually really proud of the city.
We made a concerted effort to get back to Chattanooga because we have a lot of supporters there. People there really need our services.
Chattanooga has a very high number of nonprofits, but we don't have things that Planned Parenthood stands for and does and provides, and it's been a long time since we've been able to have that here.
The nation's largest abortion provider, Planned Parenthood, has hired new staff members to serve the Chattanooga area.
Planned Parenthood is speaking out about what they're doing in the Chattanooga area.
We do not want Planned Parenthood anywhere near with their curriculum our kids.
The church's website says they're also in the process of raising $150,000 for an abortion reversal program for Choices, a pregnancy care center in Chattanooga.
When we added staff there, I could not believe how much people freaked out. I mean, our opposition just lost it.
The media does play like a huge role into it, especially by, some of the things that they say about like Chattanooga's completely abortion free, like Chattanoogans like don't want abortion.
I had an interview scheduled with a local reporter, but she canceled it, and she said that her editor had told her not to do the story because people in Chattanooga don't want to hear about abortion.
I did an article with the Times Free Press, our local newspaper, and I received Facebook messages telling me that I was a baby killer. It can be a hostile place to be, which may be why you don't see as much vocal support.
You know, the thing I love about our partners and allies in the progressive movement is that they get how abortion access and reproductive health care intersects with all these other different issues.
A member of this board told me recently that expertise no longer matters in this conversation, sadly. And to that I say respectfully, you are wrong.
I wish that didn't take so much of our mind share and our energy to combat the wild misinformation campaigns against organizations like Planned Parenthood and now our organization. One of our 10 core values is we are 100% unapologetically pro-choice, pro-bodily autonomy.
Mothers are critical to the movement. The proportion of people who are obtaining abortions are mothers already. Like, we know what it takes to raise a child, and we're not using abortion as birth control, we're using it to provide for our families, to provide for the children that are already here that we do have.
2 years ago, I was pregnant. I made it almost to the 3rd trimester with that pregnancy. And I was told at the doctor's office that my son was not going to make it. And I had the option to have that miscarriage on my bathroom floor, which would have been horrifically painful and graphic and emotionally traumatic, or I could have a D&C. Even then, 2 years ago, she had to send me to a special pharmacy because most of the pharmacists in town would not fill my prescription when they saw it was for a D&C. That was devastating to me, and I still am intensely grateful that I was given that choice. If this legislation goes into effect, that choice would have been taken away from me. These types of bills, the overreach that we're talking about, those choices should not be made by anyone except the person who is pregnant and their medical provider. I really believe that the landscape here in Tennessee is going to look very different in about 5 to 10 years. So they should buckle up and enjoy the power while they have it.
I live personally in the city of Knoxville. You can't be elected in the city of Knoxville without being a Planned Parenthood supporter. I'll just tell you that.
Planned Parenthood has become a defining element of my identity here, and it's inextricable from my story, my Tennessee story. I moved here full-time in May, early June of 2014, and I was at Planned Parenthood events by like August.
Planned Parenthood stickers and trans rights and all that. I've lived in Knoxville since 2016. We moved here from outside Chicago. We were packing up to move here, and the truck driver said, "Oh, you're gonna have some culture shock." It's like, "Oh, I've lived in the South. I lived in Texas," but he was right.
Knoxville pretty much never lets you forget that you're in Appalachia, because people are very cold here to outsiders. You know, that's a kind of key characteristic or value of Appalachians. And, you know, when you come to learn the story of Knoxville, the history of this place, of this region, it's clear why.
In May 1933, a new chapter was written in American public policy when the plan was brought before the representatives of the people in Congress. An act was passed creating the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority.
The TVA completely transformed the geography of this region in ways that took people's homes and farms and land and destroyed intergenerational wealth such that it was. And young Appalachians today may not have been here when the TVA flooded their entire town to build a dam, but it doesn't mean that their parents and grandparents have not transmitted to them a healthy sense of skepticism towards people who come from outside of this region. Then we finally were like, oh, it's not actually like a valley of homophobes. It's just people who take a little while to, to warm up to, I guess.
The religious flavor is a lot more heavy in Knoxville, and I know that when you're here and you're in it and you grew up with it, you don't feel it, but as an outsider, it's very apparent and interesting to navigate.
I grew up religious in Texas. We were church-going people for my whole life. I know it sounds cliche at this point, but the 2016 election changed a lot in my personal faith life. As suddenly everything I grew up being taught and everything I thought was true, suddenly I just felt like my faith was being distorted for political gain, and I couldn't do that. In the South, in a religious culture, you learn things about different groups of people, whether explicitly or implicitly from culture, and I wanted to find out if it was true. And so I was like, I'm gonna go meet some people from the LGBT community. I'm gonna go listen to someone who actually had an abortion. I wanted to meet these people I've been told about. At Planned Parenthood, there was an event coming up called like How to Talk About Abortion 101, just how to talk about it. So I went out of curiosity, and now I'm in a room full of women who have stories vastly different than mine, but I connected with as people. And it's just kind of like one of those, they're not monsters. They didn't flippantly be like, oh, I'm gonna go get an abortion today. Like, that sounds great. And it's just, they didn't fit the stereotype I had in my head. So then naturally I wanted to learn more.
Hello. My name is Jacqueline Levy, and welcome to our first ever #PreachYourAbortion.
I'm actually spearheading an event called #PreachYourAbortion, and women of faith will share their abortion stories from a pulpit in a church. So they're literally going to preach their abortions. It's a storytelling event to humanize the picture of who this affects.
First, I want to say thank you, Jacqueline, for your inspiration for this event, because it is in the sharing of our stories that healing happens.
It's time to take back that conversation from a faith perspective.
The story of my abortion is a story similar to any 16-year-old who finds himself pregnant.
What is that quote? Like, when women tell the truth, the world cracks open. So I want to be part of that.
In gratitude for this time together, in the name of love, which is expressed in many scriptures and by many prophets, we pray. Amen.
One group is on a mission to put a stop to abortions. They're called the Church at Planned Parenthood.
They're here to fight abortion, their weapon of choice, prayers. While they make it clear this is not a protest, bringing a church service to a Planned Parenthood, they say, sends a clear message.
And Planned Parenthood sent us a statement tonight. It reads, quote, Ken Peters, who started the church at Planned Parenthood, is not from Tennessee. He moved here last year, and since then, we've seen an uptick in the amount of protest activity we have. He doesn't know that in East Tennessee, we value the ability of families to make decisions that are right for them without interference from politicians, end quote.
The extremists are loud. But that being said, I live in a neighborhood full of people with Planned Parenthood signs. I think when you only focus and listen to the vitriol coming from our opponents, it's a form of like systematic gaslighting. You can come to believe, well, maybe I am crazy, and maybe I am trying to support something that only like a really small minority of the population thinks is necessary. But the truth is, it's not a small portion of the population. We reach thousands of people, and we're gonna continue to do that.
I'm from New Jersey, and I came here for college. Gen Action and the Planned Parenthood of Knoxville are actually like one of the reasons I think that my experience turned from being really lonely and hard to really joyful. Gen Action is a nationwide club, I guess you would say, on college campuses that serves as a representative of Planned Parenthood on that campus.
A lot of students don't come to college with knowledge about comprehensive sex ed. And they also don't really have the knowledge on being involved in community action, because I think getting involved can be really intimidating.
Joining Gen Action and being a part of Knoxville's Planned Parenthood chapter was really foundational for my career. Actually, it's what prompted me to switch my major from political science, because learning about the reproductive justice framework and how intersectional it all is, it just seemed like I had a future that was really exciting and creative and I could be passionate about.
For all of high school, I was a part of FYI. I got to college, and a lot of what I wanted to focus on was healthcare and disparities in Appalachia. I don't think I honestly would have been led in this direction without being in FYI or being in Gen Act.
So, my name is Noé Monarres. My pronouns are they, he, or all pronouns, open to all, but prefer they, he. And my title is health educator, but personally I feel like that doesn't really encompass all I do. The biggest thing that most kids need is a person they can relate to, and I didn't have that growing up, so I'm gonna be the loudest, most flamboyant femme Latino that you are gonna see on the street, because that's what kids need, you know? Push the envelopes and all of a sudden the envelope's bigger. So that's my viewpoint, so that's me. I was born in Maryville, Tennessee, which is like 15 minutes out of Knoxville, but moved to Knoxville when I was 4, so I say I'm born and raised here. So both my parents immigrated from Mexico. I grew up in a very like bubbled living environment, I would say, because like at home it was just very Mexican. Like my parents are immigrants, they own a Mexican restaurant, so like they didn't really have to detach from our culture very much, especially at home. But then I like was going to private school here that was an all-white predominant institution, right? So it's like a very like, it felt like being one of those like living in both worlds. Came into my queer identity around like high school age, and that's I think really like the biggest pushing point for me, where I was like, okay, I really gotta like do a lot more social justice-y work because I'm one of the only non-white students in my school, and my parents don't know much about this, so it's like my identity is like brand new to them in a way. And really I've always loved the emphasis on sex ed because again, Knoxville, Tennessee, coming from a Latino background, sex was not a thing. Like you did not talk about it. Like the extent of the conversation was my mom being like, this is a condom, the end. And I was like, okay. I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to do anything sexual education. People always end up thinking that sex ed is just birth control and like what to do with your penis and vagina. And I'm like, no, it's just kind of deepening your own understanding of what it means to be a human or a person and kind of helping you expand the way you should navigate your relationships within a community. Hello, kids. And I think Izzy's a senior and you two are juniors, right?
Oh, we're juniors. Mars is a sophomore.
Oh my god, well, I had y'all backwards. So like, I actually graduated in May of 21, so I'm literally like basically their older sibling. It kind of has made it all really easy to kind of like tailor the program to their specific interests, but simultaneously expanding what all they know about it and exploring where we can go with it.
Get out these four and then pass them to Avery.
That works, and I grab and then you give me yours.
Over here, still need those.
Now we got a groove down.
Yay. So Framing Choice is a photography project that we do every year, and we basically take 2 photographs each person in FYI, and it is to represent a choice that you have made.
This one was about getting into a relationship that wasn't the healthiest.
Okay.
And then focusing on healing is this one.
I titled this photo Life Out of Focus. I've always been focused on like these big things that I want to do and then get disappointed when that's not something that I get to do.
So these are kind of about finding peace in where you're at and finding beauty in the little things in life.
Honestly, a lot of it has to do with our FYI students' identities as they kind of start to really come into them during these formative years.
Going to Knox County School, Knox County Middle School, we didn't have the best sex ed program. It was basically just one guy who came once a year and talked about abstinence and how if you have sex, you'll die. It was just really harmful, and it also was not LGBTQ inclusive at all.
We don't have to level set with them in a way. Like, their foundational understanding of diverse identities and transness and queerness is like already like, I would say miles above like the average American. They're in a whole new generation, whole new exposure on social media. So like most of them are queer, some of them are trans, some of them have best friends that are trans. So it's like, they're already invested deeply, much more personally.
There's some basic sex ed like STIs and anatomy, but I think we go like pretty in depth, far more than we ever did at school. The reproductive oppression timeline, teen dating violence and consent, how to advocate and lobby, those were some of my favorite. We also help our peers get access to birth control and any other help they might have and answer any of their questions. It's a very simple answer, but it's what we do.
They downplay what they're learning because they're learning it and it gets so easily picked up and into their narrative and their day-to-day, and I'm like, oh God, it's like, it's fun to see that this is like the actual work and it's actually being impactful, and so yeah, keep the squawk.
I remember my mom, she's only woken me up to tell me news 2 times. The first time was when Donald Trump got COVID, and then the second time was that the building had burnt down.
Last week, we reported that a Planned Parenthood clinic in Knoxville, Tennessee was set on fire just a couple of weeks ago on New Year's Eve. Authorities have since determined that that was, in fact, an arson attack, and it was a complete destruction of the property. 9 fire units responded to the scene, but they couldn't save it. The clinic was in the midst of a $2 million renovation that was due to double its size.
There had been a couple of other incidents before with the clinic getting shot up, which was really scary. And then just to hear that it had completely been burned down was even worse.
A lot of people in rural communities, they didn't know that it burned down. And so they would still come drive hours to the location and it's not there anymore. To have to leave without life-changing, life-saving healthcare, it's just deeply upsetting.
Starting long before the New Year's Eve fire, we have just been under constant attack. The vitriol pouring out of our elected officials in Nashville, it has been extraordinarily challenging.
They are bullies. They are ideologues who really don't care about women or children. They're control freaks. That is what make me want to fight. So it's like, you know, that kind of stuff just makes me go, okay, I'm going to be bigger and louder.
In the face of tragedy, one of the things that happens to people who have communities around them is that the response can be so positive, so reassuring, so encouraging that you no longer can imagine life before the tragedy.
Yes, it was massively detrimental, massively detrimental. But I grew up here, so like in my head, in my like community, like even when I was in White High School, like Planned Parenthood was a thing. Like the entity, the institution itself, the cultural feeling, it's been present, it's gonna stay present. So when the building got burnt down, I didn't take it as hard because I was like, it's still just a building. Like at the end of the day, I know Planned Parenthood's still here. I'm pushing myself to like keep making those connections and actually going out into the community, still showing people that we're here, even if we is me, because everything's changing for everybody.
I think that's where we're at right now, is that we're reminded of the incredible support that this community and region has for Planned Parenthood, the love that they have for the organization. That what we have to do is get over our own grief so that we can do the work, which is to care no matter what.
We're not going to let people scare us out of being where we want to be, and we want to be there. You know, in Knoxville, we have to find a place where we can provide services before the building is completed, because it's going to take a long time to get the building done. So we have to do something in the meantime to meet our patients' needs, where we can see them in person. And one thing that's on the table is a mobile health unit, and we are working really hard to figure that out right now.
How's everybody doing this afternoon? Thank y'all for coming and joining us today at the Black Party. Absolutely. That's right. It's okay to pump your fist.
My name is Antoine Dandridge. I'm the Black Organizing Program Manager for Planned Parenthood. Growing up, I didn't even have like comprehensive sex ed until I was an adult and was able to figure it out. Actually, probably most of it came from working at Planned Parenthood as an adult. And I'm like, oh, this is how I am. Okay, this is how I exist. Okay. Memphis is a majority black city. Our population of black folks is closer to 60%, which is the largest in the state.
Memphis is a hub for historical things, right? It's whatever the energy of the universe is, it keeps landing there.
Right now we're standing in front of the Lorraine Motel. It's a place where we pretty much feel like a lot of us lost our dream.
Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for rights. When people get caught up with that which is right and they are willing to sacrifice for it, there is no stopping point short of victory.
What Martin Luther King was doing was person-to-person interaction. It was boots to the ground. And I feel like the burden will be lifted a lot more when we pick back up that same version of activism and connect with each other.
I think one of the tougher things about organizing in Memphis is that you can talk strategy, you can talk ideas, but you really have to talk authenticity and you have to talk intent.
It's a family affair.
Y'all, this is a black party, so don't look at me sideways because I'm talking like I'm from North Memphis on the mic, okay? This is the black party, baby. This is not a block party. Let's be clear. Okay.
So in 2020, I created the Black Lifestyle Advocates for Culture and Knowledge, which is a fellowship program to inspire organizers and also people who just wanted to see a better Memphis.
I've been organizing around reproductive rights and health since 2014, and what I noticed was some gaps in how we communicate to each other and how things are disseminated to us as Black people in our communities. And oftentimes we don't feel like we're part of the conversation, so we don't really want to participate in voting. We don't want to participate in legislation, but I'm here to remind you that this is also a country that we pay taxes to as well, and we need to figure out how to be seen and how to be heard.
What the fellowship does is it creates a structure that has consistent meetings and engagement opportunities, training opportunities, exploration opportunities to tell the stories that Black Memphians want to hear right now, and also to identify the needs of those in our community that actually want to see change.
We highlight the specialties of each one of our fellows and allow them to give the education on what we need to be educated about.
If you don't know, Black women are 3 times more likely to die in birth than white women. So when we're talking about miscarriages, when we're talking about reproductive health, these things just don't run in our family because they run in our family. There were outside factors that have actually contributed to this.
Working paycheck to paycheck, they can afford to take off the work to go vote, or they don't have a lot of early voting polls because of racial discrimination. So just know.
As a Black person, a lot of times when we do the work, there's backlash because it's like, you're Black, look at the history, and you're working with Planned Parenthood.
I want to be very clear. We're very well aware of the history of Planned Parenthood, and what we don't do as Black organizers is that we don't run away from the history. We figure out a way to make sure it doesn't repeat itself.
I think it was very powerful having the fellowship actually explore this topic and make sure we're making the connection to where we are now, because the truth is, this is not the same organization today that it was 100 years ago. What we've learned from this theory of the Sanger era is that some of the same disparities and issues that created the need for abortions in communities of color then still exist. What this allows us to do is to have an internal conversation about how we can kind of deconstruct those things so that we can have a realistic, more current, story and narrative today. When you talk about 60% of a population of the city, that's pretty much a huge portion of our patients, is a huge portion of our supporters, is a huge portion of voters in our community who deserve to have a seat at the table. I think the next step for us, like Black organizers, is that we got to figure out how to move this work into policy. Now, how long will that take? I don't know. But I think that every step that we take to that is worth the work.
Say it after me. We came. We came. We saw. We saw. We conquered. We conquered.
This is the kind of work that you can't do for a paycheck. It must come from your heart. You must be deeply, deeply committed to the mission. You have to be motivated to help the community, whatever is your community. In our case, the Hispanic community. We benefit a lot of having 2 Latinx Hispanic programs in the same affiliate, which is Raiz and Promotoras. That way we get advocacy and sex ed together. I primarily work for the Promotoras program as the coordinator, but today we're taking care of some of our distribution for the Free Condoms Tennessee program.
Esta es nuestra segunda vez, ¿no, Chris? Yendo a Sister Reach. Sister Reach es un muy buen colega. Es una organización también que está en las mismas luchas que Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood tenemos un gran aliado para la comunidad hispana, Latinx, y en especial para la comunidad migrante.
Promotores basically means in Spanish, means promoters of health. And this program is devoted to the Hispanic population in our region to teach them about sex ed, but everything is free. Basically, everything is in Spanish. And they can go to the community and start talking to other community members. We're particularly interested in prevention of STIs and birth control methods.
Sí, fui promotora, estuve bastante tiempo involucrada con la organización. De hecho, tengo el honor de haber sido una de las primeras 3 promotoras de Cristóbal. Luego de allí surgió el programa Raíz, que es sobre defensoría o advocacy, como lo conocemos en inglés. Y pues tú me dijiste, aplica, a lo mejor tienes un buen perfil, sería bueno, ya eres parte de nosotros. Resulta que mi historia es bien bonita. Yo digo que es así porque yo soy de Venezuela y bueno, yo tuve que venir a los Estados Unidos buscando protección. Yo soy asilada. En ese momento, aun cuando estaba todavía con mi proceso de visa acá, pues no tenía mis documentos, no tenía seguro de salud médico acá en los Estados Unidos. No tenía obviamente aún número de seguro social. Y una amiga me comentó de que existía un lugar en donde podía obtener mi anticonceptivo. Entonces yo llegué y empecé en Planned Parenthood como paciente y fui con mucha duda porque no podía creer que en verdad era gratis o a muy bajo costo, no podía creer que no me iban a pedir documentos. Pero sin embargo fui y aparte en ese entonces yo ni entendía ni hablaba ni nada de inglés. Cuando yo me di cuenta de cómo era el centro de salud, lo primero que yo pensé es ¿por qué yo no sabía de esto y por qué mucha gente en la comunidad no sabe de esto? Y debe haber alguna manera en la cual yo puedo quizás ayudar o hacer algo para que esto suceda.
Not a lot of people are paying attention to the Hispanic community that we have. For most part, they don't read or speak English. And so it's really difficult for them to access any healthcare services, in particular in reproductive health.
Ok, y hay que tener en cuenta que Raíz...
Mi nombre es Vanessa Dafne Gloria Neria, es muy largo, pero trabajo en Raíz como fellow, apenas voy a cumplir 1 año aproximadamente. Yo soy de México y llegué a Nashville hace como unos 10 años. Con tan poco tiempo que llevo trabajando en la comunidad y dando esta información de la salud reproductiva, los derechos a la salud reproductiva. Es un gran impacto porque lo tienen en español.
Yo conocí a Vanessa por medio de la organización en una iglesia precisamente donde me ayudaron con un mercado. Entonces es una labor muy bonita porque pues, eso es lo que hace falta, educación e información.
El bien común es que nuestra minoría hispana alce la voz y que la minoría hispana se eduque, porque muchas veces los programas están, los servicios están, pero la gente no sabe, a la gente no se le informa y uno como hispano no tenemos esa cultura de estar preguntando.
Entonces uno cuando va llegando como migrante, la verdad que piensa que sí, no merece nada aquí, que solamente viene por un rato y que solamente trabajar en lo que más pueda y regresarse, ¿verdad? Con la ilusión de ver a su familia. Sí. Pero desgraciadamente venimos con esa mente cerrada, pues, y los ojos.
Cuando Vanessa fue a donde yo estaba laborando, ver lo contentas que se ponen las chicas con recibir cosas que prácticamente antes para tenerlas tenía que salir de su bolsillo. El saber que lo contentas que estuvieron las chicas con recibir una copa menstrual que no la conocían. Sí. Ella con sus pláticas pues ayudó mucho a las personas y con todo lo que las chicas recibieron o recibimos, me incluyo, fue de mucha ayuda. Entonces, yo
quisiera que en un futuro hubiera más servicios, más apoyo, más diferentes oportunidades para las personas recién llegadas a este país que no tienen el idioma, informar a la comunidad como el aborto y como otros temas que han sido para muchas personas difíciles de aceptar.
Estudié leyes, o soy abogado en mi país, en Venezuela. Ha sido para mí quizás un poco frustrante, si esa es la palabra que puedo usar, en que yo no puedo legalmente desarrollar mi parte o mi área como abogado acá en los Estados Unidos sin recibir antes una licencia y presentar mi examen de la barra. Actualmente estoy trabajando en ello. Voy a tomar mi LLM o LLM, que viene siendo la forma a través de la cual yo puedo revalidar, por decirlo así, mi título acá, para luego poder tomar mi examen como de la barra de abogado. Mi futuro es seguir ayudando a la comunidad, especialmente a los migrantes, con quien obviamente al también serlo yo me siento sumamente identificada. Mi más grande meta hasta ahora, personalmente hablando y en el área profesional, es poder ser abogada de migración lo antes posible acá en los Estados Unidos.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Today, front office, we have Dominique. Back office, we have Courtney, Coco, and Kenya. Remember, no cell phones, personal belongings in the consult rooms in the nurse's station. Coco, specifically for Coco. All right, thank you. That's it. Have a good day. I am Crystal Millender, and my title is Senior Health Center Manager of Planned Parenthood of Tennessee and North Mississippi. I've always been strong on women's right to choose. And for me, it was a no-brainer. Like, Planned Parenthood was it for me. You're at our Virginia Run Cove location. This is our second location here in Memphis. I am basically here most of the time in the Memphis location, but we do have our Nashville location that we travel to at least 1 week out of the month. Providing abortion in Tennessee is difficult because at any point in time, things can change. We can be in the midst of surgery clinic and our laws can change to where we would have to shift and move patients and staff midday. And it makes it difficult on the patient. I think about that often because I think about what that patient has to go through to even call in and schedule an appointment with us, to even come in and walk to the clinic. You know, I'm so grateful that we have our volunteers, our escorts.
I love our patient escorts. They do amazing work for our patients. They are our eyes and ears on the ground. I love seeing them every morning when I drive into work. They make my day.
I have been a patient escort for over 30 years. I walked my first patient in March of 1991. This is my 8th state that I've escorted patients in, and it's in my blood, it's my heart and soul, and I cannot imagine my life without it.
I started volunteering with Planned Parenthood in the late 1970s. The Junior League of Nashville, its biggest placement of all volunteers was at Planned Parenthood. This is in the late 70s. It wasn't until the election of 80 that it changed. It was a no-brainer to be a Planned Parenthood fan. It was a no-brainer to be pro-choice.
So I come from Mississippi. I feel like feminism is definitely a queer issue, and as a queer man, I mean, it's definitely using the privilege I have to help lift others.
My involvement with Memphis Planned Parenthood is relatively new. I started this year. I got involved because I just wanted to make sure that the women and men of Memphis have a resource here.
This is my first time in the South, Mid-South, whatever you want to call it. It is insane how different things are compared to other places.
I'm
so easy.
I'm a huge queer family, and so for all of us, it's so easy to live. We lived in Seattle, we lived in San Francisco, and it felt so good. And we felt horrible every day. We're just like, people like us leave, and if we leave, then there's nobody else. And so that's why we came back here.
Yeah. Oh, sweetheart.
I just love you so much.
Protesters will overtly deceive our patients as they're coming in.
So many of our patients will yell at the protesters going, I'm here for birth control, or I'm here to get a test.
And they'll ask, why are they here? I'm like, oh, I said, they don't trust you to make the decision that's best for yourself today. So I trust you today.
I don't care why you're here. It's not my business.
Right.
It is no one's. Almost said it.
It's none of my fucking business.
You said it. I didn't. Man, I've been holding off on that. I could have dropped an F so many times. You're killing me.
I thought you'd be jealous of that, so I wanted to just...
Culturally, between Memphis and Nashville, it is different. Our protester activity here is not as aggressive as it is at our Nashville location.
Sometimes there are a lot of people here. Today, it's not so bad because I guess it's raining. There's not so many protesters here. I've always believed that reproductive rights, that decisions are about abortion are the decisions of the people who are pregnant. I kind of missed out the first time on all the women's movement and stuff like that, so I don't want to miss out on it this time. And I'm just trying to make things better for people in the future.
I've been a patient escort here for coming up on 4 years now. I actually moved here from California, and I moved from a place where this wasn't an issue. So when I got here, I was like, this is where I need to be spending my time and my energy, where I know I can make a difference. I actually grew up in a very abusive household, so I'm used to this. That's why I can stand here and listen to some guy just screaming at me for 2 hours straight. The coping skills that I had when I was a kid, I can actually put them in a practical use and help someone and do something with that. I hope that my calmness and casualness and just like, they're there, they're not bothering us, we're here, we're together, we're going in. I just hope that people feel that.
I wish that people, could realize that the people we serve are just like them, just like anyone else. It could easily be, any of us that's coming in for services here. And I think sometimes we forget that.
Bombshell breaking news now from the U.S. Supreme Court.
Hundreds of protesters gathered last night after the stunning leak of what is reportedly a draft opinion suggesting the court will strike down Roe v. Wade this summer.
If the justices vote to overturn Roe v. Wade, Tennessee and a host of other states will see stricter state laws kick in automatically.
News of that leak and the possible overturning is sending shockwaves all across the country.
Y'all want to just scream together?
1, 2, 3.
Speak up, fight back. Speak up, fight back. You hear that, Supreme Court? We're speaking up and we're fighting back today.
The game has gotten real. And I'm here to tell you today that this is now not just our fight at Planned Parenthood, this is our fight as community members, as citizens, as supporters.
The people out here are black, white, Hispanic, Asian, urban, rural. This is the new America today.
I want you to remind these motherfuckers that we're not going anywhere.
This past primary in May, 65% plus votes that were cast by women. So you depend on us to get you elected? Well, we have demands on you too.
This isn't about being pro-life, because if you are pro-life, you will be pro-public education. If you are pro-life, you will make sure that people have pathways out of poverty. So this is not about being pro-life.
In the state of Tennessee, we can't talk about sex to our children. The 1 in 4 black girls that are going to be the victims of sexual assault before the age of 18. You're not doing shit about that. Change those statistics and I'll sit down and talk to you about abortion. Planned Parenthood saved my life. I don't think they heard me. Planned Parenthood saved my life. And there are some folks who may not agree with me. But until you've walked in my shoes, had 2 master's degrees, lived all over the country, and had to fight for every single thing you've got, don't tell me about mine.
Let's act now again. Let's act now again. Let's act now again. Let's act now again.
I want you to remember today as the day we reawaken the power we hold together. Okay, I can do it. Thank you for giving me the time to talk to you directly on what is profoundly a devastating day for all of us. Planned Parenthood of Tennessee and North Mississippi was the first abortion provider in our region after Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973. But today, the Supreme Court overturned that landmark decision, taking with it the federal constitutional right to abortion and placing it in the hands of state legislatures. We expect the injunction on Tennessee's 6-week abortion ban to be lifted quickly in a matter of hours or days. Tennessee's trigger law, which is a total abortion ban, will take effect soon. Mississippi is in the same situation with a trigger law that will ban abortion in a matter of days. Though we grieve the loss of abortion access today, know this: our doors are still open and will absolutely remain open, and we will never stop fighting like hell to regain and protect our patients' right to abortion care in Tennessee. I want you to remember today as the day we reawaken the power we hold together. I need you to remember that we have the ability in our numbers, resources, and voices to get the right to abortion back. And I hope you always remember the rage, shock, and sorrow you feel right now, so that together we can change the course of history. We're going to make it through this, but it will take all of us. Thank you so much for supporting abortion patients and abortion providers in Tennessee.
You know, we were here in Tennessee for 40 years before abortion was legal, providing sexual health education and reproductive health care services. And that's what we're going to continue to do if abortion is not legal. The fact of the matter is, our abortion patients are still going to need us. We're going to provide patient navigation. We're going to create an abortion fund to remove financial barriers for our patients. We are going to problem solve around transportation and other barriers that our patients face. We're going to be here when patients get home from having an abortion as a place for follow-up care and a safe place to talk about the fact that they had an abortion. We're going to continue to identify as abortion providers. That's who I am. That's who the people who work in our health centers are. We are abortion providers, and we're going to continue to do that and identify that way, even if we can't provide the services here at home.